I recently finished the season finale of WandaVision on Disney+, and I must say, it really didn't make very much sense. As a therapist, I absolutely viewed this show through the lens of watching someone who has experienced an unimaginable trauma. Spoilers ahead for everything. I was able to sympathize with Wanda because not only has she had to watch her brother die in front of her, she had to watch the love of her life die an extremely horrible death twice, one of which she had a hand in, and then when she goes to confront the person who did it, he doesn't even remember her, thus robbing her of any real sense of justice. I was completely okay with everything Wanda did in the throes of her grief. If I were going to diagnose her, she absolutely would qualify for a diagnosis of chronic post-traumatic stress disorder. CPTSD is basically just a label we give to people who have been through a lot of trauma, like a lot of it, from birth, sustained, all the time. She literally watched her parents get exploded and was then transferred to a facility to be experimented on, radicalized by a terrorist organization, and fast forward a little bit more, at least in part responsible for blowing up a hospital, saw her brother, whose only power is being faster than bullets, get shot by bullets, and many other things I'm sure I missed. I'm reminded of my work in my private practice and the multiple ways in which our mind erects defenses to protect us. All of the things people call mental illness, I call reactions to trauma, and the causes are the situations people have been through. Considering the sheer amount of pain Wanda went through, anyone who has ever been through any sort of abuse can understand how and why Wanda Maximoff created an entire world for herself and decided to live in it. Most people think of what she did as denial, but I see it as a form of acceptance. There are people in this world who go through unimaginable traumas, and there are people who are shielded from ever experiencing anything of the sort. In my trauma-informed therapy practice, I've heard stories from people that would put the plot to several psychological thrillers to shame. I've also worked with people who've used their money and privilege to do just as Wanda did and create for themselves a world to live in free of the things that other people worry about. This is what is meant by white privilege, white people. Most of you don't realize that the worlds you live in, the suffering you experience, all of your pain, all of your sadness, while real to you, is still nothing compared to the suffering that non-whites go through. You live in a fantasy world created by your ancestors. In fact, the only time you even get a glimpse of that suffering is through your experience of white guilt. This is a theme that is mirrored throughout white America, especially with white women, where there's no accountability for their actions, even when those actions lead directly to the denial of basic individual freedoms for marginalized groups. I'm so sad to see this theme echoed in WandaVision. I understand that Wanda was going through an immense period of tragedy and grief that many of us cannot understand. Much in the same way, it's difficult for me as a survivor of abuse to explain what it was like to live in constant fear of punishment as a child. I know that throughout my life, I've made decisions, errors, or mistakes because I was still behaving as if I was living in the town of Shellyview with my mother's influence. Everyone has done things that they are not proud of and that they may feel shame for, but most of us have experienced some form of accountability. Wanda stole government property, completely annexed a small town, which she then forcibly placed under mind control, made them engage in daily routines without their consent, used them as proxies for her nightmares, making them dream the dreams she didn't want to, almost let a man choke to death, and had no plans to release the town of Westview from her control. Her accountability for this? Dirty looks from the town of people she had mentally enslaved, and a sympathetic "I would have done the same with your power" from the other black character in the show. Side note, have you ever noticed how in shows made primarily for a white audience, there's a direct correlation between the skin tone of the black characters and the number of black characters in the show? Anyway, the last scene is Wanda surveying her psychological destruction and flying away to probably save the day in the upcoming Doctor Strange movie. However, there is a scene that perfectly illustrates and mirrors what happens when we attempt to hold white women accountable. At one point, Agatha releases the town from under the psychological torture that is Wanda's control. They all begin to tell Wanda of the pain and suffering they experienced. Her first response is denial and to say that Agatha is making them say these things. What is it that they were saying? Well, one person says, "I have a daughter. Could you please just make her part of the show so I could see her?" Another complained of the nightmares he experienced. Slowly, the voices overlap, all bearing witness to the immense suffering on which Wanda built her perfect reality. Her first response is to cry, which is why the concept of white tears exists, and secondly, to create magical nooses to place around the characters' necks to stop them from speaking, literally choking them for telling the truth. She then does what she could have done all along and raises the barrier barrier, allowing them to escape. Fast forward as she defeats Agatha, again mentally imprisoning Agatha in her own body, and retires to have one last kiss with her delusion and flies away to go think about what she could have done better. It is ridiculous. Now, to white America, this isn't a problem, and it makes sense because rarely are white people in our society, white women especially, held accountable for their complicity in malicious acts. This is why everyone was so shocked when Ashley Boppitt, an Army veteran, was shot as she attempted to breach Secret Service to get to Mike Pence for the execution plan by the insurrectionists. There were no deep dives into her past background, no pictures in the media implying that she was unstable. We were all told to skip right past accountability and focus on the loss of life. Meanwhile, since Blue Lives Matter so much, what is the name of the police officer who was killed? My point exactly. Acknowledgement does not equal accountability. Even though Wanda half-heartedly acknowledged her role in these acts, accountability would not be flying away from the scene of one of the most terrible denials of agency and disregarding of consent, since Wonder Woman told us it was okay to take over the body of another man and use it as an instrument for sexual expression. Accountability would have been Wanda turning herself over to the authorities. Imagine a scene where we watch Wanda as she has to actually listen to what it was like being under her mind control. Imagine a scene where Wanda has to actually engage in dialogue with one of the citizens of Westview, and perhaps through the use of some power dampening device, the citizen is able to explain to Wanda exactly how they felt without fear of retribution due to the immense power that she wields. I doubt we will ever see such a scene in any form of storytelling media with predominantly white writers, because life imitates art and art imitates life. And as of now, I have yet to see justice in either. That outfit though, that outfit.